Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Minority-owned businesses in Detroit and Southeast Michigan now have a new pool of money available to help them stay afloat. The $100 million Minority Business Access Fund is designed to assist small to medium-sized companies with their cash flow needs. These loans will help bridge the gap for minority-owned firms that are often turned down by traditional lending institutions. Joining me now is the architect of the fund, Louis Green, who's the president and CEO of the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen.
Obviously, it sounds like a wonderful idea and very much on target for a very important problem. Any business you talk to will talk about cash flow and access to capital as one of their issues. That seems like it's always a bigger problem when you're talking about minority businesses.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Minority businesses traditionally have had just severe discrepancies in access to capital. There's a pretty well-known study in the business community done by the U.S. Minority Business Administration that showed black businesses in particular were more likely to get turned down for loans. When they did get loans, they were approved for lower amounts. Those loans were at higher interest rates.
Sure.
And the experience was so bad with them for banks that they just decided not to even apply.
Yeah.
People were so discouraged by the process.
Right. And this fund targets a very discrete problem with businesses, which is cash flow, which is a different kind of problem from some of the other things that you need money for.
Yeah, cash flow is probably one of the things that make or break businesses. People understand that once they're in business.
Yeah.
And so, you know, at the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, we've been able to connect our minority businesses with over $25 billion in contracts last year. And that's great. If you have $2 million that's coming from Ford 90 days from now, right, and you have employees you need to pay every 2 weeks, suppliers for raw material, and you don't have the money until that check comes, you will go out of business. And right, so people sometimes will factor, they'll sell their receivables, they'll do anything they can to stay afloat. And some people can't and they go out of business.
Right. One of the things I think people don't necessarily know is that you can be a profitable, quote unquote, business and go out of business because your cash flow doesn't work in a way to keep you open.
And that's exactly right. Coming out of the recession, which was tough for everyone and tougher for minority businesses, we lost about 615 minority-owned businesses. Out of those 615, about 580 were profitable.
Right.
But they didn't have positive cash flow.
Right. And that's a staggering number. Is that number Detroit or is that number Southeast Michigan?
That was state of Michigan.
State of Michigan. Right. 600 minority.
That were part of our organization.
Right.
So you know that was out of 1,800 businesses at the time. So it was a third of folks that were in the industry.
Right. What are some of the reasons that you feel like the lack of access to capital persists? I mean, obviously, there's historic racism that has prevented not just black businesses, but black people can't get loans for those reasons. But are there other factors that are driving that are sort of in the way?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One, you know, people do business with people who they know, like, and trust. Right.
Sure.
It's a lot of relationship, and there aren't relationships with the bank. And I won't necessarily attribute that to racism, but there is a big kind of chasm between the banking community and minority businesses. They don't attend the same, they're not members of the same golf club. They don't tend to have, you know, kids in the same school districts.
Sure.
And so, you know, there's not a relationship that's there. And so there's not a comfort
That has a lot
level.
to do with lending. It maybe shouldn't, but it does.
And it absolutely is. It's probably one of the biggest factors. So there's not a trust level, and so their access to capital, just from that very beginning point, you start to have a problem.
Right. When you were talking about Detroit businesses, we have seen a lot of attention from banks recently in Detroit saying, look, we understand that there's underinvestment here, there's opportunity, we want to be part of that. Are they helping to fill that gap too?
Maybe. I haven't seen it as much. I haven't seen it as much. I mean, I think in some ways this fund is a result of the banking community being inaccessible to minority businesses. And I don't think it's that the banks aren't trying and that they don't care.
Right.
Is that they don't get it,
Right.
right? And there is no relationship there. And so, again, the data shows that these black businesses won't even go to the banks anymore. There's another study that the Federal Reserve issued that people would sooner talk to a neighbor, whoever, your barber or your beautician or anyone else other than the banker because of lack of trust.
To get money.
Yeah.
In other words, you will go someplace else.
To have a conversation about it, not even to try to borrow, but there's a lot of work, I think, an opportunity that the banking community can do, but the needs are too great, as Southeast Michigan in particular with the M1 rail, the Arena District, all these great projects. To make sure that minority businesses are fully participating there, we needed to make sure something was in place. Because all this development, you worry about gentrification, about people getting passed by. We wanted to put a marker in to make sure that this wasn't going to happen.
Right. I live downtown, and so I dodge orange barrels and construction equipment all the time, it seems like right now. I have never, frankly, seen downtown Detroit as active in that way as I do right now. I gotta say, I don't see as many black faces on those jobs as you might expect. I will say that M1 seems to be an exception. I've seen lots of African Americans, it seems like, working on that. But you talk about the stuff that is going on with Bedrock, the different projects there, the apartment buildings that are being redone. It doesn't seem like there's equal access.
Well, it hasn't. I don't know about equal access. Definitely not equal results, right?
Right.
Right. And I think that comes from again lack of access to that. And again, it goes back to people do business with who they know, like, and trust.
Right.
And so, lots of good people in this town. The folks at Bedrock are good folks. Lots of good folks, but it really takes a kind of a focused act to get some different results.
You have to make an effort.
You have to make it happen. And I think some people say, "Oh, is this an affirmative act?" No, there are highly qualified businesses. It's unfortunate we have people who can do work in Beijing or Shanghai, but can't do work on woodwork, right?
Detroit.
And so we have construction firms that do work in China, but aren't working in Detroit, and it is a little baffling.
Right, right. One of the things we saw with the Red Wings district proposal was a fight over the idea of a community benefits agreement, which we didn't end up getting there, and now City Council is saying, well, maybe we ought to pass a law that says you have to have that. They're thinking in the same way that participation matters, and who gets to be part of these developments and the comeback depends on who has access to these things. Do you feel like that's a good way to approach that?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, yeah, I think you have to be nuanced, because you don't want to get it to the point where it becomes. I have minority businesses who are trying to do $1 million expansion, and they don't want to get burdened by the paperwork. So I think if you sit at the right levels, it's very important, because it's not happening organically, right? You want to make sure it happens, but not in a way that stifles growth. So it takes some balance, but it absolutely is going to be necessary at some level.
Yeah. Do you see, what about in the neighborhoods? I mean, we're now talking about a lot in Detroit that downtown and midtown are on this upswing, and there's no question that seems real, but that the neighborhoods are not benefiting. Seems like this issue fits into that.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing we're excited about, is that a lot of those projects in the neighborhood are really cash flow intensive, needed projects, and one of the things out of this $100 million in less than 2 weeks after we announced it, $18 million is already out the door. Right?
Is that right?
And so that tells you about the demand
How
for that.
much of the pent-up
and some of those projects are
need
going towards some things that are going to be in neighborhoods. So we're really excited about that.
Right, right. What about the role of the DEGC in Detroit? They handle a lot of development downtown and in the neighborhoods. Have they been active and partners with you guys in diversifying who gets what?
Yeah, they have been. They've been good partners. Again, there are lots of good partners in this town. I mean, I think the challenge is that people, when they hear minority business, sometimes they think small out of necessity, right? That it's a small business. Some people probably think not as good. The whisper,
Sure.
right? But So yeah, DEGC's been good. Mayors, there are lots of folks who are participating, but we need a little bit more than participation now, right?
Right.
We need a cohesive strategy to ensure results that are going to be good for everyone in this community, right? These minority businesses don't only hire people of color, they disproportionately will hire people from the neighborhoods because they know them.
Right.
But they're really going to be key to the overall sustainable economic development in Detroit.
That's right. I mean, and one of the stats that I look at all the time that we don't talk that much about is how many businesses we have lost in the city of Detroit over the last 40 years. I mean, you're talking about 75, 85,000 businesses that have either gone out of business or some of them have, of course, moved to other places. But that has a lot to do with the instability, the economic instability in these neighborhoods.
No, it is, and a culture of entrepreneurship, I think, is important. We were, a kind of a company culture, get a job in a factory, good job, and they provided a good middle class lifestyle.
Right.
But when you pass away, your good job passes away with you.
Right.
So really the culture of entrepreneurship, of owning and meeting community needs by community-based businesses that we can now fund with community sources, I think is really going to be important for Detroit's future.
Right. So if I'm a small business owner and I want to participate in this, how do I do that?
Well, the easiest thing is to go to our website, minoritysupplier.org, and you can, think /MBA fund, such as the degree MBA fund, and you can get information there on the fund. You can fill out a form. We have been able to get money to people as quickly as 5 days. Usually, I think 10 days is more of a reasonable thing. And so we will work with you. And I think you can come into our office, and we're not there to sell you on the fund. If something's better for you, our folks will do that. We're not there to promote the fund. We're here to promote access to capital so folks can be successful.
Right, right. And when you're talking about a cash flow loan, sometimes, I mean, that's a very short-term need. I mean, I need the money now. I'll have it back in a couple of months. So does that help keep the fund intact and sort of revolving?
It does, and many times, first couple loans, we put a line of credit for $4 million for one minority business in Detroit. We put another $6 million line of credit because it allows them to do that. There's a roughly 45-day gap between when they have to pay money out and when they're going to get paid, and we now help them balance that time.
It's a cushion.
It's a cushion.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, great idea, and let's hope it makes a difference, not just in downtown and midtown, but throughout the city.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks for being here.